Let me read for you the response of Pope Francis to Austin Ivere's question when he asked Pope Francis, how are we being called to live this extraordinary Lent and Eastertide, this time of the pandemic? He says, I asked him if he had a particular message for the elderly who were self-isolating, for confined young people, and those facing poverty as a result of the crisis. This is what Pope Francis had to say. You speak of the isolated elderly, solitary and distant. How many elderly there are whose children do not go and visit them in normal times? I remember in Buenos Aires, when I visited old people's homes, I would ask them, and how's your family? Fine, fine. Do they come? Yes, always. Then the nurse would take me aside and say the children hadn't been to see them in 6 months. Solitude and abandonment, distance. Yet the elderly continue to be our roots, and they must speak to the young. This tension between the young and the old must always be resolved in the encounter with each other, because the young person is the bud and the foliage, but without roots they cannot bear fruit. The elderly are the roots. I would say to them today, I know you feel death is close and you are afraid, but look elsewhere. Remember your children and do not stop dreaming. This is what God asks of you, to dream, just as Joel does in the Old Testament in chapter 3. What would I say to the young? Have the courage to look ahead and be prophetic. May the dreams of the old correspond to your prophecies. That's also from the Old Testament book of Joel. Those who have been impoverished by the crisis are today's deprived, who are added to the numbers of deprived at all times, when men and women whose status is deprived, they have lost everything, or they are going to lose everything. What meaning does deprivation have for me in the light of the gospel? It means to enter into the world of the deprived, to understand that he who had no longer has. What I ask of people is that they take the elderly and the young under their wing, that they take history under their wing, take the deprived under their wing. What comes to mind is another verse from Virgil's at the end of the book 2 of the Aeneid, where Aeneas, following defeat in Troy, has lost everything. 2 paths lie before him: to remain there and weep and end his life, or to follow what is in his heart, to go up to the mountain and leave the war behind. It's a beautiful verse. The Latin translates as, I gave way to fate, and bearing my father on my shoulders, made for the mountain. This is what we all have to do now today, to take with us the roots of our traditions and make for the mountain. I'll record another response of the Pope's to this historian from Oxford that's published in the Tablet, the International Catholic Weekly.